Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fireside Wisdom with Childless Elderwomen. I'm Jody Day, founder of Gateway Women, and your host this evening. And we're going to be discussing solo elderhood with this wonderful panel of elder women guests from literally around the world. So I'm going to introduce them to you before we kick off. And top left on my screen is Carol Scott, and this is Carol's first time with us on Childless Elderwomen. Thank you. Carol Scott is from the UK. She's 70 and she's been a therapist for 25 years. She's worked extensively with those who are childless not by choice and went through her own journey of miscarriages and baby loss. Carol is currently writing a book and creating a 6-week program about recovering from the end of a long-term relationship with the working title of Beyond Breakup, which includes a chapter on being single and childless not by choice. Thank you, Carol, for being with us this evening. It's this evening for me. On top right of my screen is Vicki Robin. So Vicki Robin is in the Pacific Northwest in the USA. She's almost 80 and is a prolific social innovator, writer, and speaker. As well as a best-selling author, she is the co-founder of Conversation Cafes and the 10-Day Local Food Challenge and hosts the podcast YouTube series, What Could Possibly Go Right? Currently, she's exploring the, quote, unmapped territory from older to elder on her fabulous Substack, Coming of Aging. Vicki serves on the board of the Post-Carbon Institute and lives by herself on Whidbey Island in Washington State, USA. Okay, second line on my left is Julie Greenan. Julie Greenan is 70 in the northeast of the UK and has just started sharing her writing on Substack. By the way, I'll share all the links for these later. She's single, having been married and had several long-term relationships in the past, and has no children and prefers to avoid categorizing herself as either childless or child-free. Julie's been a regular panelist on stages and podcasts discussing her experience of being single and childless, and is an active member of our online community. Susan Dowry in Australia, currently on the road in New South Wales, is in her early 60s and a long-time member of the Childless Collective online community, as well as having hosted the Brisbane gathering for our community for several years. She describes herself as an unapologetic spinster and is single and childless due to not meeting the right man. She has recently left her home of many years and is exploring solo van life on the road in Australia. A dream of so many of us, and we're going to hear more about that. And next up is Donna Ward. Donna is 70 and is a writer, editor, publisher, and former psychotherapist from Western Australia who now lives in Melbourne. She is the author of a 2020 memoir, She I Dare Not Name, A Spinster's Meditations on Life. Fantastic book, published by Allen Unwin Australia, and a campaigner on the issues facing older, single, childless women in Australia. And actually, Donna let me know that there's singlehoodaustralia.org now has a website, which is where a lot of her advocacy has been focused. We'll talk about that a bit more, no doubt, later. Bottom left on my screen is Sue Fagalde-Lick. Also from America. She's in her early 70s and is the author of numerous books, including most recently her memoir, No Way Out of This, Loving a Partner with Alzheimer's, about her marriage to Fred, his decline, her life whilst being his sole carer, and his death. A musician and singer, she lives alone in rural Oregon and writes a Substack about her experience of solo aging called Can I Do It Alone? And finally, last but definitely not least, Ruth Berkowitz, bottom right, is in her mid-50s and is a holistic well-being coach for childless, not by choice people and an insight meditation teacher. Within our online community, Ruth hosts its Mishpasha group for Jewish childless women, and Ruth is based on the East Coast of the USA. So thank you to my amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a really busy time of year to do something like this. And thank you to all of our participants. There's so many of you have shown up live. It's really lovely to have you here. So I want to let you know that the last 15 minutes we do extra questions if you didn't get a chance to send one in before, and if we haven't covered that topic. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Click that and you can put your question in there and I will sort of pose it anonymously to the panelists. Can't promise we can do them all though, I'm afraid. We've got a lot of people here. So the topic of solo elderhood is a really important one because it's extraordinary. I've read an awful lot of books on aging and on women's aging, and with the exception of about two, almost every single book seems to presume that the reader is married or partnered, heterosexual, owns property, has children, possibly has grandchildren as well. There's this incredible idea that, there's this very heteronormative and wealthy sort of middle class idea of what aging looks like. The idea that there might be, actually 20% of the cohort might be aging without children and many without partners as well. Perhaps they don't have a partner or their partner has deceased, like it is with Sue. And also because of the way aging works, quite often, if you do have a long-time partner, you might find yourself aging alone at a certain point as well. But there are also many, many more women who have never been, as the UN cutely calls it, married or in a long-term union. I love that word union. I don't know why. And the numbers are really increasing. Since the 1970s, in the UK, for example, the number of women who are neither married nor in a non-term union has gone up by 70%. And actually, all over the world, the number of women who are not in long-term committed partnerships is massively increased. Interesting enough, in Donna, it hasn't gone up as much in Australia as in other places. I think perhaps there's been a stronger culture of single women in Australia for longer. Maybe we can talk about that. So I think I mean, I am partnered. I was partnered when I was younger. I was divorced and childless through my sort of 40s and early 50s. And now at 60, I've been with my long-term partner for 8 years. But I'm really passionate about the experience of women without children and without partners, because we keep getting left out of the story, as if we're not there. And those of you who know me, it's like, there's something we're not talking about in the culture, that's usually what I want to talk about. So we've had about 300 questions sent in by you. Thank you so much when you registered. No way we're going to be able to get to them all, but what I've done is I've actually grouped them, and I've grouped them into themes. And so what I'd like to do is maybe just talk about the first theme, which I've called meaning, purpose, loneliness, and connections. And these are questions around loneliness and isolation, having a desire for connection, including sometimes partnership, concerns around existing friendships with mother friends and family members, finding ways to embrace the single life, including pushing back against ageism and singlism, and really how to find meaning and purpose and how to find each other. I mean, you can see that is a huge topic. You can kind of pick what you like from it. Is there any one of my panelists who would like to speak to meaning, purpose, loneliness, and connection? You can fight amongst yourselves. Yes, Sue.
Start because I usually,
Yeah.
that's why I don't fight with people as I get out ahead of the pack.
Okay. Do you want to speak next, Vicki, after Sue?
Sure.
Yeah, fabulous. Sue and then Vicki.
That is so huge. I don't know how to get a hold on that.
Yeah.
But loneliness is a big problem. I mean, there are all kinds of people who are usually partnered and have families and stuff will say, we'll join a club, volunteer, blah, blah, blah. That does not bring them into your home and into your daily life. It's not the same thing. I've got all kinds of activities going, but there are still those moments where it's just, damn, there's nobody here. There's nobody to talk to. No one has called me except one person I asked to call me since Friday. And it's just a lonely time. Um, you do what you can. You have to reach out as much as you can, but it's difficult. You start feeling like you can't, that it's too hard, that, well, they should be calling me, you feel invisible. So
Mm.
there's that. And you do have to have a purpose. I mean, if you get up at, my work gives me a purpose,
Mm.
but there's still times when I'm too tired to work and it's like, now I don't know what to do. But you've got to have some kind of purpose to keep you going. And you need to be open and honest with the people you do run into and say, I'm lonely. I
Mm.
need some company. You
Mm.
need to reach out.
Mm. And I think for you also, the church and playing music for the church, those kind of
Oh, yeah.
those regular things that that we're part of can become almost like scaffolding.
It's an anchor. Yeah. It gives me something to hold on to. And it's like Christmas, going into Christmas. What was I going to do? Well, I finally have an invitation to dinner, but otherwise, all I had was church. But at least I had that. So,
Mm. Mm. And you wrote a really gorgeous blog, I think that came out yesterday on your Substack about, the exhaustion and expense and of buying and mailing gifts,
Mhm.
which is something you and I share to other people's kids that, with a diminishing returns on that in terms of even a thank you
Yes.
these days.
Yes.
Yes. And I posted that your article in the online community and online, and it was
Oh,
getting a
thank
big
you.
response. I think people were coming and commenting because touched a nerve. Yeah.
Yes, I'm getting a big response too. The thing is, my brother's family is growing exponentially, and and it's still just me. And so the workload is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at what point do you say, well, I can't do this anymore? So it's a dilemma.
I think also you touched on something there, Sue, that maybe someone else wants to pick up on, perhaps Vicky, is that when we live alone for whatever reason, and we don't have family, the onus on is always on us to initiate everything.
Mm.
And sometimes
Right.
that just gets exhausting.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I think people who haven't been single for extended periods perhaps don't understand the cognitive load of that,
Yeah.
you know.
No.
Mm.
They're
Mm.
forming a new group at our church as we speak, and I'm not there. I'm one of the few women who did not join because I said I'm already overwhelmed
Mm.
because I am doing my work and I'm taking care of everything with the house
Yeah.
and me.
Yeah.
Nobody else is going to help with the groceries or anything else.
Mm.
I don't have any more bandwidth,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they
Thank you.
don't understand.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. Did you want to pick up on that, Vicky, or?
Yeah. Ironically or not, this is the anniversary of something I did to handle that feeling of being always the one who reaches out,
Mm.
you know, and people are, yeah, like that whole exactly what you said. I don't need to repeat it. And I screwed up my courage. I I was, I was given a space in the community, this beautiful ceremonial space. I invited 24 of the women I really like, who I feel a feeling of love for. And in a way, I said, it's just, I want to have what's called, in Lakota, a wopila, a thanking ceremony. I want to thank you for being my friends. I needed to do something, yeah, to get over my own feeling of exclusion, my
Mhm.
own like inner conversation about. So I invited them all. And excuse me, I don't have teeth in the front for temporarily. I'm sort of enjoying it. Anyway, yeah, so it was dark because it's in the Pacific Northwest. I bought gifts for everybody. I bought these little prayer dolls and these little hearts, quartz hearts. And I was nervous as hell. I was just like, I don't, because it's that feeling of like, what if I say I love you and nobody says I love you back?
Mm.
And so and so they all came and I welcomed them, and in front of every seat I had a little pouch with all their gifts in it. I had no idea what to do next. That was my entire success. So one of my friends said, well, why don't you, because there are people from different parts of my life, go around the circle and have people say how they met you. Okay, fine. So the first person was, short, and then the next person was longer, longer, longer. And it ended
Mm.
up being my memorial. It was like people talking about the where they met me and what I meant to them. And
Wow.
crushed, it crushed the inner voice that says, I am not, if I don't keep generating, I will be forgotten.
Hmm.
That's the feeling is I feel like I have to keep generating or I disappear from other people's lives. So I realized this year I was going to write everybody a letter. It's like that feeling is gone. And I feel, wow, it's really changed things.
That's an extraordinary thing to do and incredibly brave.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
I was just thinking, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then I thought,
I know, I
yeah.
know, I know. yeah. Everybody's got to look their own memorial before they die.
There is some comments in the chat to the same effect saying that's a wonderful, brave thing to do. Yeah, amazing.
So, I mean, one of the parts of these questions, there was quite a few people saying, you know, how do we find other women like us?
Can I just add something about meaning and purpose?
Absolutely.
Because I'm kind of just like a couple of years into being solo. I came out of a 20-year relationship in the pandemic. Apparently, the divorce rates went sky high. It was like, you know, the final straw. If something wasn't working, it was truly going to break in the pandemic. And I was really on my knees, and it was like, okay, I've got no partner now. I've got no children. I don't have grandchildren. I was at rock bottom. And I think in a way I kind of needed to go there, because I reached a point where I thought, what is the point of me? And I thought, oh gosh, I'm buying into patriarchy, pronatalism when I say things like that. And I came to the conclusion that the point of me is that I am here. With or without children. I contribute to my environment, to my friendships, which are really my family in a way. Although, you know, they sometimes kind of feel a bit let down by them. And my purpose and meaning in life in a 20-year relationship was based around that relationship. So when it's no longer, it's like, I've got to redefine this now for myself. One, as I get older, and because the things that gave me meaning and purpose don't fit anymore, or I can't do them anymore. You know, I went off to Botswana earlier this year, camping. I mean, I'm not a camper. What made me go, I don't know, but I went and found in a camper girl and I absolutely loved it. But I came back and I needed another holiday after that holiday, because it wasn't a holiday, it was an expedition, you know, camping in the wild. It was brilliant. But it's like now, I think I'm slowly coming to a place of meaning and purpose. It feels like it's more of an internal thing rather than an external. Yeah, it's like I'm quiet in myself. I've just been ill for 2 weeks, nasty virus, hardly seen a soul. And I've really had to rely on myself. And it's like, it's kind of like finding Nemo. It's like, I've got to find me, the real me at this stage of life, who's very different to even 10, 20 years ago. So it feels like a very different thing, meaning and purpose.
Thank you for that, because I think that the sort of literature around aging, and particularly sort of the field of spiritual aging, kind of really talks to this idea that there is this shift to really going, you know, a more internal life that happens, that perhaps when we don't have the energy or the interest perhaps in an external life, there is a shift to the internal. Donna and Ruth.
I wanted to talk about a book called Women on the Margins. It was published in 1998 by Tula Gordon, who recently died. Actually, I found out, I thought to myself, oh, I think now with Zoom I can actually meet this woman who changed my life. But I missed her by about 3 months. So that was a bit tragic for me. But one of the things that she noticed, so she did a piece of research on a range of women who are in Norway and also the UK, and who had been single in various ways throughout their lives. But what she noted in that piece of research was that for those women, and this is certainly true of myself, who've been single all their life, aging is a much easier process, and coming to terms with meaning and aloneness is a much easier transition, because you don't have the grief of losing that relationship that was so important, or several relationships that have been important to you, or not having children for whatever reason. So that was one thing I wanted to just put into the discussion, is that if you've been doing it for longer, it's easier in the end. So Just a heads up to those of us who've been spinsters all our lives. The other thing that I wanted to say about meaning, I think meaning's such a big existential question that your relationship status or your parental status doesn't really cut the mustard. Like if you're finding meaning only out of those things, I think, you've missed the point of life somehow. And it's easy to miss the point of life because that's all we ever talk about is whether or not we're coupled and have children. So please don't see that as a judgment from me. But I think the big thing about meaning is the fact that I've said this many times in this forum, we are embodied consciousness in flesh. That is the meaning of life. The adventure, I was saying this to a friend just yesterday who was we're talking about the idea that the body betrays us. It's a phrase that people with cancer often use. My body's betrayed me. My friend used it because her knees were betraying her. A couple of other things were betraying her. And I was saying, this is just the experience of being embodied consciousness in flesh. The adventure is because our consciousness has this idea that we last forever, that it's eternal. We get a shock that our bodies actually aren't, even though we know every day flowers bloom and die. We tell ourselves this by putting bunches of flowers on our table. Remember, morte, remember, So I think that, when I'm having those feelings of, oh my God, what am I here for? I remember I'm here because I'm consciousness embodied in flesh, and that's the big adventure. All the rest is Christmas decorations on the tree. The tree is what's important. Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, I wish I could be that wise at 7 o'clock in the morning. Thank you so much. Just noticing the time. I'm going to move on to the next group of questions, but
Ruth has something to say. I want to say that Ruth has something to say.
Oh, yeah, sort of along the
sure.
same transcendental lines. Well, I've had back problems since my 20s and worked on and off and have been convalescing at different points. Work has been challenging, and so I've spent a lot of my adulthood not working or working very part-time or underemployed. And so I really built the muscle of not tying my identity and purpose to my work, my profession. And I have a somatic healing teacher, and she said to me, God or life hasn't forsaken you. And just being present to nature is a purpose. And maybe that'll resonate with other tree huggers out there. But as my world has already gotten smaller as I age, as I add menopausal body aches, and my mobility is challenging. I just because of the spiritual practice I've done for years of mindfulness and really cultivating a relationship with myself that isn't judgmental, that's caring. I can just savor the small moments and find the meaning in just walking the same earth behind my home with my dog and through the different seasons and being a witness to that.
Thank you.
I find a lot of meaning in that.
Yeah.
And connection, belonging. I belong to the earth. I belong. Yeah. What a magnificent thing that I'm walking this earth with this beautiful creature that I'm so bonded to, that's been with me through so much, through the seasons.
Thank you. And actually, just reflecting
back on
one thing.
Can I drop in one thing? I want to speak for people who've been divorced or whose husbands have died, for whom it's a liberation. It's not an abandonment. I just think there's plenty of us who might be like that.
Okay. Thank you to those people. I hope you feel heard and seen. And Donna, just something you said about the book. Someone did put the name in the chat. I've forgotten the book you were talking about.
Women on the Margins.
Women on the Margins. About perhaps it being less of a transition for those who've been single and haven't had children for a long time? Because something I'm really noticing amongst those in my life, and I'm lucky to include you in that, who haven't had children and who've had to kind of develop a conscious relationship with that experience, whether it's been by choice or not, have had to live outside the mainstream because we're not mothers and we're not partners, is that doesn't always, but it gives an opportunity for a level of kind of spiritual and emotional and intellectual courageousness that can produce the most remarkable people. And certainly, I think for me, as I move into the aging part of my life, I am so grateful to having done so much work to kind of recover my identity from, well, if I'm not a mum, what am I? Carol said, that sense of like, well, who am I? What am I for? That's what I spent my 40s doing, is kind of, scraping that part of me off the floor and finding meaning just in being, being me, being alive, walking on this earth, as Ruth said. And I'm really leaning into all of that as I'm dealing with, the internal reflection of the aging process. I'm enjoying the limited lifespan of the body parts is less enjoyable. But I have resources for that. And I'm noticing that perhaps some of my friends who are mums and who've had that very kind of valued socially identity, they haven't done this work yet, So I just wanted to notice that. And the next big theme of questions, which we could do basically about 10 weeks on, so we've got 10 minutes, is basically, who's going to be there for me when I'm old? And I wanted to share an anecdote with you about this to kick us off. So 10 years ago, I was part of a group of 4 campaigners in the UK, and we came together to form a campaigning group called Aging Without Children, AWOC. And I remember we had done this big report, and we were having this launch for the report, and there were lots of sort of parliamentary bigwigs and things like that at this drinks function, and quite a lot of the people there were parents. And I remember 2 people at it kind of came up to me and said, "Terribly, very good what you're doing. Blah, 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 have another glass of warm white wine," kind of thing. And then they said, "I didn't have children so that they could take care of me when I was old." And I went, yeah, I get that. I mean, when I was trying to conceive, it never came into my mind I was trying to have children so they would be there for me. I said, but once I knew I definitely wasn't going to be having children, I noticed it was almost the next thought that came into my mind was, who's going to be there for me when I'm old? And I said, so it's great that you don't want your children to be there for you. So I'm really curious what plans you're putting in place instead. Can we just have a thought about what the answer might have been to that? Just like, oh, I think I need a refill. It's just like, because unconsciously they were relying on it. They just didn't know that they were relying on it. And when we don't have children by choice, not by choice, or any of the kind of gray areas in between that, we don't have that unconscious fantasy. Now, it's possibly not even a very good idea to have that unconscious fantasy, because we don't know how our relationships will unfold with our children. Our children could predecease us. We could be estranged from them. So many things that could happen. We might not even like them very much when it comes to that time of life when they're making crucial decisions for us. So actually having a different plan, thinking consciously about gathering a community around us that we can trust as we get old, I think it's something that would help a lot of people. But for those of us aging without children, that's really what we have to do. And actually shout out to our queer brothers and sisters. They have been doing it forever, creating chosen families, building those relationships over a long time. And if Stella was here tonight, she'd say we all need to queer up our elderhood plans. So shout out to lovely Stella tonight. So yeah, I mean, some of the questions that came in around, who's going to be there for me? How do I do my estate planning and my end of life planning? A lot of people are involved in caring for their own elderly parents. And there is this default carer assumption that the single Childless daughter will be the one that steps up into that role without any thought about the fact that this may impact her financially during, saving for her own old age. It may also impact her relationally. She may not be able to meet people, create connections, possibly find a partner, or even just have a community, and there's no promise that her siblings' kids are going to look after her either. So this idea that she can sort of be thrown to the wolves and it doesn't matter. Issues around housing. How do we live? Do we want co-housing, co-living? The precarity of a lot of housing situations for older single women, living in the rental sector. This presumption again that everyone is sitting on property that's going to look after them in their old age. This is not true. Creating communities, managing finances, and managing our health. Now, like I said, that's a 10-week course. Who wants to jump into any of those? Sue.
It is a 10-week course, and we did do a webinar on this a while back. That people, if you can put the link to that for people to watch that again, because there's so much. I mean, just every time I go to the doctor, who's your emergency contact person, and I'm like, okay, my brother lives far away, and he's pretty much all I've got. So I've got some neighbors that I put down, but it's iffy. It's always a big problem, and you think that you've got it in place and things change. So that's my big goal for the coming year, is to get that nailed down completely, because I've been in the situation. I was at the hospital and needed a ride and didn't know who to call. It's terrible. And I've been very sick where I really wish someone could care for me. These things are not good. So you do need a plan somehow, even if you have to hire somebody, which gets into the money issue.
Indeed.
A lot of elder women don't have much money. They have very little to live on, and they're scraping by, and a medical emergency can just ruin them. They get prescriptions they can't afford, so they don't get them. There's a lot of financial problems. So it is not easy, and people assume, medical people always assume you have someone who's going to watch over you after you get home, who's going to give you rides if you need one. And it's not fair to assume that, because many of us are on our own. So it's a dilemma, but we do need to make a plan, and we need to make it, yesterday.
I'm going to move to Julie next, but first of all, I just wanted to say that there's lots coming up in the chat about this.
Yes.
There is a lot to be worried about. And many of the so-called solutions like co-housing and things like that are actually really expensive and out of people's reach. What I'm doing in my life, and I know a lot of people are really interested in this, and this is something I'll be helping other people to do in a few years' time, is I've started something called AlterKin, which stands for Alternative Kinship Network. And I'm actually building a conscious mutual aid community around me, intergenerational. It's not a friendship group. It's, yes, we're friendly, but we actually, all of us are aging without children from 40 to 80. And it's because I think the intergenerational aspect is really important as well. And it's like, we know why we're coming together, because we each understand this vulnerability. And, over the next few years, that'll be rolling out. I'll be learning from it, creating a mutual aid community in a very small rural community. It's very delicate, so there's also a limit to what I'm going to be able to share, because there's going to be a lot of confidentiality. But the principles is like, how do I create something so that, Sue, I do have someone who can come and look out on me? There will be a group of people who say, actually, Jody is just back from hospital. I'll pop into her on Monday. I'll pop into her on Tuesday. Someone else can walk the dog. We need to spread this around a group of people, so that it's not so we all worry about being a burden, but actually, my experience is actually people really like to support each other. But what we do seem to have lost in many ways is ways of asking for help and ways of receiving help. Julie.
Quite a lot of what you just said, really, Jody. I was just going to comment in the same way. And, I think it's worth saying again, really, how much fear and panic and anxiety there is for us around this. You know, I know primarily from friends from within Childless Collective, like Gateway Women, and you know, people who may be perhaps still in their 50s, so not as old as us, and are so busy caring for perhaps an elderly mother or another dependent, which is in itself a constant reminder of what you are not going to have.
Absolutely.
You know, who's going to do this for me?
Yeah.
And also just are worn out with working and doing that. No energy left to develop anything else. And, you know, I'm panicking in my turn because I kind of feel, well, I think one of the things about being single, perhaps, maybe this is my assumption, is that you're not always necessarily so rooted in one place. You know, I mean, I live in a rented home, a rented flat. I was previously living in Spain, and one of the reasons, until 2 years ago, and one of the reasons I eventually managed to decide that I needed to move back to England was because I couldn't imagine how I could grow old in a foreign country. I didn't really know how I could grow old in my home country either, but I just thought there's more likelihood of being able to build something here. I've forgotten the rest of that point, actually. What was it? Oh, yeah. But actually, where I'm living now, I don't know if I'm going to carry on living there or whether I might move 10 miles away.
Something I hear this a lot. And when people say about alterkin, it's like, I'm not where I want to be.
Yeah.
Start anyway, because you're growing the capacity to build those kinds of relationships, to create those kinds of networks. You don't know where they might lead.
That's a good point.
There is no loss to building that.
That's true. No, you're right, Jody. That's true. You're right.
Then you'll have more experience if you need to transplant it somewhere else.
Indeed. Yeah.
And I think sometimes I'm not where I want to be. Well, therefore I'm not ready to do it, is also a way to mask our fear of the vulnerability of actually doing it. Because we say it wouldn't make sense to do it now.
No. I mean,
because it is really scary, by the way. You know, I'm doing this and I'm asking these questions, and they're some of the most delicate conversations I've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Donna and Susan, I think.
Sorry, I just really wish somebody's made a comment in chat about churches, and I know that we've mentioned that about joining. Sue, particularly, you're a church goer and involved with your church. I often really wish I could be. I can't. I haven't got it anymore to, you know, commit myself to. I've just sort of moved away from those beliefs, and because I think, churches are great for keeping an eye on people, or may not be, or may be terrible, but you know, they could be.
It's an established network.
Exactly. Yeah.
Donna, I'd love to hear from Susan as well.
I just a brief point is that it's not about your geographical location. I've been very peripatetic in my life. I've moved from different places. I've been in this house for almost the longest I've ever lived in any house in my whole life. So I'm up to 13 years now here. And I've been trying to establish a community here in 13 years. And just every time, just when I think it's all tickety-boo and going to, you know, roll over, everyone in the group changes. So they go to another country, somebody dies, somebody gets very ill, whatever it is, neighbors move, whatever it is. So it's like Jody said, I think, you know, it's an ongoing process. It's not like having family. I have actually no family, but it's not like having any family. If you don't have any family, it's nothing like having family. There's no residual group that's going to stay there. And I think the art of Alterkin, Jody, great name. The art of Alterkin is what we're going to develop in these coming years, and it's going to be an ever-changing process, whether you move or the world around you changes.
I just wanted to speak to, there's quite a lot of questions coming up in the chat about Alterkin. It's a project that I'm only just getting going. I do talk about it quite a lot in an interview that you can find on my Substack. There's an interview that I gave last year. It's a video interview with me. And I do talk about my ideas for it there. It is something that over the next year I'm going to be talking about and writing about as I develop it in my local community, because my goal is to use my experience to hopefully create some kind of template that other people can use, and also to help people with the emotional challenges of these very delicate conversations, which can feel very exposing. There's a lot about that coming up in the chat. Basically, what if people say no? Yeah, what if they say no? We'll probably survive. But it's like, how do we have those conversations so that they can say no in a way which doesn't feel confronting? These are quite skilled conversations. And you know what? They tap into what it is to be human. We are a tribal species. We know how to cooperate with each other. It's just we've lived in a culture that's told us it's weird. But actually, it's very natural to come together to support each other. Vicki's had a lot of experience in her community of doing something quite similar. Did you want to speak to that, Vicki, or Susan, maybe, did you want to talk?
Yeah, no, give Susan a chance. She hasn't had it.
No. I'm responding to the being conscious about what stories are being other people are projecting onto us.
Oh, yes.
And what stories we're telling ourselves about what's going on. And what that, just being conscious of that, how that is limiting what you decide to do or say. One of the surprising parts about going on the road is that I find myself with people. I mean, because I've always been single, people have always, I've had the pity story. I've had the, you could be making more effort. I've had all of those sorts of things. You poor, the whole thing. I don't get any of that on the road. There are lots of people traveling by themselves. And what I get is the story, oh, you're so adventurous. You're so brave. I mean, that's a lot easier to carry, but it is no more true than the other stories. And it really helps me see. And the other part, I think about the practicing the Alterkin thing, is to start small.
Yes.
I'm walking around with a stick, and when I walk into a shop, people are anxious. They don't want me to fall over on their doorstep and they have to fill out the paperwork. Or they're just coming in at the same time. Yeah. Can I give you a hand? So even just try for yourself. What would it be like to say, oh, yes, it just makes it so much easier. Thank you. What you've done is say it's a subscribed thing. I don't expect you to be standing at this shop door and helping me over the threshold every single time. I don't expect you to pick me up from the hospital every single time I need to be picked up from the hospital. I want it on this day between this hours. Could you do that? Or saying no, actually the offer of the threshold is really kind, thank you, but I don't really need that. What would help though is 2 strong legs to run, to walk the extra miles, which are really hard for me, down to the whatever it is, plumbing section to get a such and such. Would you be willing to do that? To try and tweak it. Those are just little practice sessions.
Thank you. And something also about asking for help, and I love your skill there around asking for help, is that people like helping.
Yeah.
And what that actually does also is when you ask for help or when you give help, it's actually an opportunity for connection, and connection leads to relationship. So a lot of the loneliness and lack of connection, we're terrified of asking for help in case people think we're needy. People like being asked, as long as we get skillful about giving them a way to say no if it doesn't work. And then you start to build a relationship through it. So it's actually kind of beautiful. I mean, obviously not everyone's nice and easy like that, but you'd be surprised how many are actually.
But I think we can develop a hyper independence. And making it hard to ask. I mean, I do ask, and my kind of motto around that is, if I get a no, then I'm going to ask someone else. And if I get another no, I'm going to ask someone else. Every no is getting me nearer to a yes. So that's the philosophy I have around that, because it's like, I've got to acknowledge my vulnerability here. And it's hard for someone who's been an independent woman most of her life, even though I've been in relationships, still fiercely independent, hyper independent. through my, my upbringing. But I've really had to embrace that I'm vulnerable. I've got to go and have an endoscopy in 3 weeks' time, and somebody was going to come. No, they can't. So I have to ask someone else. I want someone to come with me. I do not want to go and do that procedure on my own because I'm shit scared to have it anyway. But it needs to be done. So, I'm just going to keep asking. And I still have some faith that someone will show up,
And I think you make a really important point there, which also relates to long-term singleness, is that we are by nature, through singleness, hyper-independent. And we have grown up, all of us, in cultures we've had an opportunity as women to be hyper-independent in a way that, our ancestors couldn't be. So actually to segue from that into being someone who shows vulnerability and asks for help, is possibly going to be quite uncomfortable at first. And that's one of the things I really, with Alderkin, kind of coaching around Alderkin, is to really help us, with the kind of the emotional discomfort by supporting each other that, this can feel quite icky, but when the alternative is not being helped at all and maybe getting ourselves into a position where we have an extreme vulnerability and we're on our own with it and we haven't built relationships with people we can ask, it's like, the price of not pushing through this discomfort and building this asking for help and building community muscle is too high. And for those of us without partners or who perhaps can't rely on someone else, it's a cost we just can't.
Julie. As we were a growing tribe, an AWOC, which I think is just London-based, isn't it, Jody?
It's across the UK. Aging Without Children, AWOC, yeah.
But, they're starting to have more meetups in person and they've got more resources because I think as we're speaking up, more and more, the non-mum network, the Gateway Women, that we're finding our voice more, that people are looking more into solo eldership. So I'm finding that, there's going to be a London AWOC and I haven't been to one before. I've joined Solo Women Travellers, which is all around the world. Some of us met up in a London pub. So, it's like, I think we can cultivate these things for ourselves if we can put a hand on a heart and say, I need this. I need it.
Yeah.
I can just quickly. I can really vouch for there is a growing number of regional AWOC groups in England. I don't know about the rest of the UK, but and there's particularly one in York where they have a great deal of resources, and there's a growing group in Leeds that meets up in person. I just wanted to have a slightly self-indulgent rant about hyper independence because I had to become self-reliant.
Yes.
I didn't want to, but I had to, or I thought I had to. So I get really good at doing things and not asking people and not crying and saying, I can't do this. And then somebody's saying, oh, but you're so independent. You're so resourceful. You're so capable. I don't want to be so bloody capable. Thank you. I never did want to be. Well, I didn't want to be helpless, but you know what I mean? I didn't want to not need anyone else.
Yeah.
And I just kind of think, oh, well, gee, thanks. Why didn't you say that in the first place?
I think you're getting a lot of nods and smiles there. Donna.
I think, if I could just quickly say it's that real, it's a spiky paradox, isn't it? Because I've always had to do everything on my own because I am on my own. And then I'm told the reason I'm on my own is because I'm so independent.
Yes.
And lap them. And if I start to say, I'm really tired of doing absolutely everything, the mental, the cognitive load, as Jody referred to it, they sit there and they tell you that you should ask more, but they don't come and help you because they think that you're doing it anyhow. So look, it's just a little insane. I'll just put that there. It's a little thing I live with every day. Thank you for your rant.
Or you have really stupid conversations about who does the plumbing in their household, the husband, the wife.
You don't care.
Yes. I don't care. No.
Plumbing, what's that? Yeah.
The plumber.
I just wanted, we've just got a few minutes left, and there was one last theme, which was, and it's for this time of year, it's like coping with grief, exclusion, and grandchildren grief at Christmas. What tips do we have for people to maybe help if they're feeling lonely, vulnerable, griefy, and excluded at this time of year? And if you could do that in 5 minutes. Yeah. And that includes Hanukkah and all other celebrations as well. Yeah. Yeah. Ruth.
So I've pretty much been single most of my adulthood, except for when I was in my 20s and then for a few years in my 40s. So I got very good at holidays as a single person, also living far away from family. And the arc of that is just letting go, learning to not judge my experience as less than, and embrace it with making choices for the day, rather than just like, oh, I'm not invited anywhere, I have nothing to do, and just sort of like being depressed about it, actually asking myself, well, what would feel good to do this day? What do I want to eat? Do I want to go somewhere special? I'm a big movie person, so pick out a really good movie. Yeah, it's so it try not to judge that what you're doing is less than the hallmark idealization of what other people are doing.
Yeah.
But it is real. I mean, it is real.
It is tough though. I
Not
found
be
that,
included. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when I was solo myself, I think I'd got to the point where I just about learned how to work out everything, but I was still working on Christmas and holidays, as in going on holiday. I think I'd nearly got to the point where I'd worked out how to do that on my own without being either the third wheel or lonely. There was a sort of middle ground. And Christmas, I was nearly there. But it's really challenging for a lot of women who can afford to, and it's their thing. Go away somewhere sunny. But that's not always an option.
No.
So
Right.
what are we doing to manage holidays this festive season? Sue.
Well, I did Thanksgiving with the family. I think we really have two choices. We can avoid it altogether. Yes, go someplace warm and sunny and ignore the whole thing, hide. Or we can dive in with family or whatever and, gather as many people as possible and try to enjoy and appreciate all the parenting things that will be inflicted on us because, suddenly you're in grandma and mama land and you're the odd one out, but try to enjoy it as much as possible or avoid it or say no to everybody and do it your way, as Ruth suggested.
I think
And stay the hell off of Facebook.
Yeah. I think you can.
Vicki next.
Sorry,
Julie,
Jody.
then Vicki. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I think you can do a kind of blend really of limited contact with the family stuff, if that's what really does your head in, to limit that and to be very choosy. But what I've found is doing your nice things that you like to do, which may be seasonal things or may not. And actually, for me, just like keeping in touch with like-minded people. So, getting into the chats and so on Gateway Women, and keeping in touch personally with like-minded friends and other women, because just even by WhatsApp, makes you feel more in connection and less alone, I think, or can do.
Can I add one thing to my answer, which and it sort of applies to all the themes we're talking about, which is a service orientation to life. Like I've been a host for an hour on the Childless Collective chat on Christmas. And that's a really nice thing to do. It takes me out of myself and feeling like I'm the only one. And I can my service helps other women like me.
Thank you.
Getting out of myself by
yeah,
how can I serve others?
That's always helped me as well. And if you're wondering, once listening, what's the Childless Collective? It's the new name for the Gateway Women online community for the last few years. If you go to the Gateway Women website and click on online community, it will take you through to the Childless Collective community. And on the 25th of December, there is a round the clock sort of womaned live chat that goes on, which covers all time zones. So there's always at least 2 people sitting there waiting for your call, waiting to have a chat with you. And you don't have to talk about Christmas. You can talk about anything. It's good fun and very lively. And Vicki.
Yeah, I've had excruciating experiences, and one because I had a real disruption in my life and I left the whole circle of meaning and I just took myself out on my own. I had cancer and I thought, well, if I'm going to die, I really want to know who's in here before I go. Because when you're in a social setting or a family, you can lose yourself in just adaptation everywhere to all different personalities. So I want to first acknowledge the excruciating experience and then say, on my spiritual journey, self-observation and compassion is a really important part of it. It's like, okay, who is it in here who is just so sad? And offering compassion to, rather than coping mechanisms, which are also delightful, just offering compassion to that one who was excluded, who the popular girls didn't, like I was always on the edge, just like going, okay, that's part of the human experience, and I'm willing to be a human.
Thank you. Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki, for saying that. It's part of that sort of loneliness thing, which people suggest you be lonely. And I think the other thing we haven't spoken about is sexuality. The assumption, the sort of dichotomous assumption that you either have no experience or that you are, wanted, available to anything, up for anything. And that business about we were talking, I was saying, I really don't want to talk about your, how you resolve your plumbing and other household issues. What I do need to acknowledge to myself, because I can rarely get anybody else to hear it, but if I say it to myself, what I really yearn for is that tenderness and touch and kindness and situational humor that develops with someone that you're really close to, you're in attunement, wry discussion, talking through issues and problems with someone who actually really cares and is going to follow up and is interested in the outcome and invest in the outcome.
Yeah.
That is what I miss.
Yeah.
That's what I have
Thank
to
you,
hold and acknowledge for myself, because very few other people will.
Yeah. But I love you, Susan. You always go right to the heart of things. Thank you for that.
I'm going to spend Christmas with myself.
Yes.
That's kind of the way I've got 2 invites, which is lovely, but I've decided I'm going to spend it myself because it's going to be the first one when my mum isn't around, and so it's going to be a bit of a challenge, I think. But I do this thing called, it's an acronym called TRACK, and I will tune into myself. I will recognize what is going on with me, whether that's sadness, grief, loneliness. I'll accept that I have those feelings. I'll then have a good cry if I need to. And then the K is for kindness. I will go into deep kindness towards myself. That for me is what I've learned that it's taken me many years to get this whole concept of self-compassion. I've read books about it, which will talk about it, but to actually really embody it, it's taken me a long time to get there. But it's crucial.
Yeah,
it's really.
Thank you for that, Karen. It's been an absolutely transformative practice for me too. I'm afraid we're out of time. I would, when you get the replay of this tomorrow, there will be a slide in the replay which has resources for you, which includes some amazing books. Donna's book, She I Dare Not Name, Sue's book, No Way Out of This. This one, which is an incredibly practical book, Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? Absolutely full of really practical tips. It doesn't presume that we're all rich and coupled. Another one from another of our regular panelists, Do You Have Kids? Life When the Answer is No. Some really interesting interviews with older women without children in all kinds of different living situations, which is really good. This is actually an oldie but a goodie. It's one of my favorites. Gloria Steinem, it's Doing 60 and 70. It's really a feminist reflection on what it means to be getting older as a woman. As an outsider, it's a really powerful book. Also, Vicki's amazing Substack, which is called Coming of Aging. Julie's new Substack, which is, I think it's Julie's Substack at the moment. But
From 70.
From 70, okay. And Sue Fagalde-Lick's amazing Substack as well. I will be sending you all of those things for you to follow up on. So thank you so much. Thank you to Carol and Vicki and Julie and Susan and Donna and Sue and Ruth for being with us today for what has been an incredible conversation. I wish we could go on for another several hours, and I wish you could all be in the room with me this holiday season. Thank you for being part of really rethinking what it means to be growing older as a woman without children and as a woman without a partner. It's so powerful. I think there's so much wisdom here. I think we can do this. I think we can do this. We do. I'm thinking actually of the title of Vicki's podcast. What could possibly go right? We could go right. You know, I really think we could. So thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.